What is going on, everyone? Happy Sunday. Welcome in to another edition of GC Live Sunday Reset with your host, Jack Veltri here. I appreciate all of you guys tuning in, and we've got a good show. We have got nothing but seemingly positive vibes to talk about after a stellar weekend for not just South Carolina baseball, but South Carolina men's basketball is back in the win column for the first time in 54 days, which is something that we will dive into plenty here. South Carolina softball went undefeated this weekend, and they're 15-0 on the year. Great weekend for Ashley Chastain Woodard and her ladies out there at Beckham Field, going a perfect 4-0 this weekend. And yeah, we have got lots to talk about. We're going to start out by talking about some Gamecock basketball, and also women's basketball picked up a win at Vanderbilt today also. So nothing but W's here in the chat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about all this stuff. And before we do, as always, got to talk about our main sponsor of the day. If you're listening live, or watching live, I should say, you'll see him right above me here on screen. But if you are listening, or you're listening back on a podcast later, wherever you get your podcast from, I'm talking about Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home, or you need help with your mortgage, but you have no idea where to begin, Clint is your guy to call. He'll help you out, take you through the process step by step. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he's also a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and all of our GC Live programs. You will always see him right above me here on screen every single Gamecock Central Live Sunday Reset during the week, whenever. He's always up there. So if you're interested, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to clinthammond.com. So all that info will be right above me here. And yes, Craig, it was a great weekend for all of USC athletics, especially on the diamond and on the court too. And just, again, all good vibes here. It's not just, baseball and softball getting the wins, and women's basketball. Even women's basketball has kind of had a little bit of a tougher stretch here with some recent losses these last two Sundays to Texas and UConn. But again, the ladies had a nice week here, and got a big win over Vanderbilt today. But let's start out talking about men's basketball, the game of the weekend, in my opinion, at least. I mean, just an absolutely great win last night at Colonial Life Arena for South Carolina men's basketball. And if you missed it, picked up an 84-69 win over the Texas Longhorns to snap a 13-game losing streak, picking up their first win of conference play. They hadn't won a single game in the SEC yet. I mean, they had 6 losses by 5 or fewer points, just gut-wrenching losses time after time. There were a bunch of blowout losses mixed in there. And this team hadn't won a single game since December 30th of 2024. So hadn't even gotten a win to ring in the new year yet. That's kind of been the running joke here, is that they just haven't won it all in 2025. But they got the job done last night. It was a great win. And I think it really started in that first half. I mean, I don't want to say you have this game won in the first half, because, as we'll talk about here in a second, Texas kind of made a little bit of a later run. But you held the Longhorns to 22 points in the first half. I mean, you were up by 18 at the break. I think the key was, look, Trey Johnson was kind of kept in check. I mean, he finished with 29 points on the day and had a 20-point second half. But that first half, 9 points, 4 of 11 shooting. Outside of that, he accounted for half of the made shots in that first half. Texas went 8 of 27 from the floor in the first half, 1 of 6 from three-point range, and also turned the ball over 6 times. For South Carolina, you had Colin Murray-Boyles absolutely going off. Lamont Paris has talked about plenty of times now where he's wanted to see CMB kind of take things into his own hands, if you will, and just become that aggressive player that he needs him to be. And that's exactly what we saw last night, with CMB taking 14 shots in the first half, 16 points, 7 of 14 from the floor. He ended up finishing with 22 points in 27 minutes before fouling out, which the officiating in this game, I mean, my gosh, I mean, it's insane how many foul shots were taken in this game. I think there were like 50 fouls or something called in this game. Just that's another topic for another day. But yeah, CMB was a monster last night. 3 blocks in the first half, and just a really good all-around game from him. And this is what you need him to be for you going forward. He's such a selfless player that it's okay for him to kick the ball out to different guys. Here's the problem with that, though, and this may not sound great. He's making the right passes. It's just the guys around him just aren't as good as him. They are not hitting shots that they should be hitting. It's open looks and they miss. You know, that's kind of the fault, because otherwise, I mean, he only had 1 assist last night. This is a guy that, I mean, I don't know how many assists he would be averaging if guys were hitting their shots consistently, but it would be, I mean, he's almost averaging a triple or a double-double already this year, but you have to think he'd be borderline somewhere in the high assist range, maybe leading the team in assists, who knows, but very good game from him last night. And I think the other key was in that first half, you went 14 of 16 on your free throws. I mentioned before, South Carolina took a heavy dose of free throw shots in this game. You ended up going 34 of 45 at the line. So you missed 11 free throws in total, but you only missed 2 in the first half. And speaking of 2, you only had 2 turnovers in the first half with 8 overall in the game. So I think for those reasons alone, that's why you were up by 18 points at the break. And from there, look, we've seen this before where South Carolina, we haven't seen South Carolina up by this much at the break, playing this well, but we've seen it before where this team has been up at halftime by a little bit, and then they kind of let everything fall apart in the second half. And that's usually been the case with this team. But considering they were up by so much, I think I don't know about everyone else, but at least for me, I'm like, all right, I think South Carolina should be able to win this game, barring some random meltdown down the stretch. They'll be fine. And they were. You know, they kind of had a little bit of a struggle at some points when Texas got a little bit hot midway through the second half, and they ended up cutting the lead down to, I think, 11 at the lowest, but it never really felt close beyond that. And by the time Texas was able to get the game down to that mark, it was kind of becoming a free throw battle at that point because, number one, the officials just kept calling fouls time after time. But it was also getting to that point where Texas kind of was just out of options and they had to foul a little bit more. So overall, very impressive game for South Carolina, winning this one by double digits, which, I mean, look, Texas is a borderline NCAA tournament team, and I think this takes a huge hit on their chances. I mean, we'll see how the rest of the season goes for the Longhorns, but as for South Carolina, look, I'm talking about this like it's the national championship or something, right? But it's like perspective. They won the game last night, but they're also now 1-13 in conference play and 11-16 in overall. So don't get it twisted. Like, great game last night, but it does not necessarily change how this season has gone. It's still, this season, quite frankly, has still been a disaster. I mean, I don't know how you could possibly go from such a great year last year, 26 wins, making the tournament, to this. And I know how it happened. The fact that you lost Michi Johnson, Talon Cooper, BJ Mack, I've said it many times before, that's a big part of it. But also, you got what you wanted in the portal. Has it worked out the best? I don't think so. That's just my standpoint on it. So, Nick Pringle, Jamari Thomas, they've had some good games here and there, but it has by no means been the same level of production as what you got from the guys that were on last year's team that aren't here anymore. So it's just a mixture of a lot of things. You have turned the ball over a lot this year. You've missed some key opportunities in certain stretches of games, and you just haven't gotten enough production outside of Colin Murray Boyles. But at least for one night, it's good to see this team get over the hump. I didn't think it was going to come last night. Like, after watching the LSU game the other night, I mean, honestly, I thought South Carolina might go winless this year. Like, quite frankly, I mean, that LSU game was just really not good basketball. But seeing them come together last night, you knew their best chance would come at home. And to beat Texas, first time playing them as an SEC team this year, it's a really good win. And to kind of dominate them, honestly, if I do say so myself, that's a really nice building off point. And you got 4 games left to go in conference play. You go to Missouri on Tuesday night. That's going to be a tough game. You go to Tennessee later in March, but the other 2 games sandwiched in between are both at home, Georgia and Arkansas. I think you can. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think you probably lose the 2 games on the road. I think that's pretty much determined. But I think you end up potentially splitting the home games. And look, does what does this win do for you? It, number one, gives you some momentum. Like Lamont Paris, I think, kind of put it best yesterday when he was talking about this game. There's a lot of relief that comes with this game and getting the win, because now you don't have to even worry about the 0-18 conversation and becoming the third team in the modern era of the SEC to go winless in conference play. Like Vanderbilt did it a few years ago, and then Missouri obviously did it last year, and they're having a great year now. South Carolina doesn't have to worry about all that talk anymore. Like if the talk is anything, it's just it's a bad season. That's really it. But I really liked what Paris said, and it's quote, "I think that's where relief comes in, is that you're able to move forward, and the last thing you remember is playing pretty well." So, and he's right. They did play very well last night. Like if they play like that the rest of the year, they can win a lot of basketball games, and that's what they're going to need here at this point. Like, look, the season it's not officially a wash. It is in the sense of like this year hasn't been great, but with the conference tournaments and stuff, and we'll see what happens there. I mean, if South Carolina goes out on a run and wins 5 games in 5 days in Nashville in a few weeks, you're going to the NCAA tournament in a miraculous turnaround. Now, what are the odds of that happening? Probably not very high, but I think at minimum, what you would like to probably see if you're a South Carolina fan these next few weeks is just to show that there's going to be hope for the future. Like, who knows what this team's going to look like next year? It's definitely going to be different. I will tell you that, number one, because you're going to definitely lose some guys. But I do think momentum is such a big thing in sports. And if you're able to use this win to kind of leapfrog yourself to maybe winning 3 out of the last 4 games, I think you're feeling a lot better about how this season was compared to how it could go otherwise. Like if you lose the final 4 games here, all right, then we'll just remember this as a terrible season. But like if you're winning the 3 of your last 4, and then you show some fight in the SEC tournament. I mean, look, I know a lot of people have checked out on this team and stuff. Like, I mean, I'm well aware of it. I see how the views have gone down on basketball stories this year compared to last year, and the interest just in general hasn't been there. Like, think about it this way: there were literally fans leaving the arena last night with like 3 minutes left to go, and South Carolina is probably going to win this game, and they're leaving. Like, I mean, you would not see that guaranteed for a just a comparison here. You would never see that for a women's basketball game, in my opinion. Like, I know people want to beat traffic and stuff, but the team gets a big win for the first time in like 2 months, and you're just leaving. I don't think that's necessarily right or wrong. I don't know, right or wrong, whatever. But you got to start instilling some of that confidence in fans that, like, is South Carolina going to be able to get this thing right next year, and what are they going to do the rest of this season? So again, we'll see what happens, but. I know the game was late last night and stuff, and it was, it honestly was, to put it into perspective, that basketball game was much longer than the baseball game yesterday, surprisingly enough. But, it's, I think it just says a lot when people just decide to leave after South Carolina hasn't won in so long. Like, you'd think that it'd be a little bit more of a celebration, like maybe a court storm. Although I think that would have been ridiculous to storm the court after that game last night. But you know what? You still gotta sell people on this program still. Like, as if 26 wins last year was not enough. I mean, the interest just has not been the same this year, even from the jump. Like, as soon as they lost that first game to North Florida, it just has not been anywhere near the same. Like, you got a good crowd for the Clemson game. You had a decent crowd last night. I will give them that. But yeah, it's kind of sad to see. Just how everyone has checked out. It's definitely a far cry from how things were last year. But EXO asks, what is up with the officials? Look, anytime Joe Lindsay is officiating a game, I mean, that speaks volumes right there. It was just absolutely atrocious last night, the officiating from start to finish, especially in the second half. My guy A Ritter asks, "Do you see Cam Scott transferring? He hasn't played much." I don't think so. Cam's a hometown guy, so I think he probably understands that like this just hasn't been the year for him to play much, and he also really hasn't done much this season in his time on the floor. It's been a struggle, I'm not going to lie, and I think people have the expectation of seeing G.G. Jackson and Colin Murray Boyles the last 2 years as freshmen come out there and dominate. But keep in mind, Cam plays a different position, and he's a guard, and I think he also just needs to get a little bit more size on him in terms of a little bit more muscle coming to next year a little bit bigger in terms of your size and stuff, and see what kind of difference that makes. But uh, I think he is someone that will probably stick around next year. I don't see him leaving. I think he's probably got a good NIL situation here at Carolina. He's probably one of the higher paid players on the team. Let's be honest, and he's definitely someone that I see end up sticking around for his whole career with South Carolina, barring some random change or something. But and I think it was interesting last night. It's a forgotten storyline in this whole thing that Cam was initially committed to Texas this time last year, and then he ended up flipping to South Carolina. So give it time with him. I think we'll see what happens. Like if next year's kind of the same deal, then I think you start to worry a little bit more. But it's his first year. I think there's going to be some big change coming in the offseason for him that helps him out going into the next season. And Michael Lynn brings up an interesting point here. He says we will have a completely different team next year and might play some freshmen. You're right. It is going to be so much different next year. I think you're going to see a lot of players probably leave, whether they're out of eligibility or looking for another opportunity elsewhere. Like think about it this way: you're going to be losing off the top of my head here BBV, Jacoby Wright. I would assume Nick Pringle. We'll see. Miles Studi, too. I know South Carolina is looking to maybe do like a medical red shirt with Studi, but that is something that we'll see if it happens. It would be nice to get Miles back next year. I think he deserves another chance to go out there. But those are the main guys you're losing. We'll see about CMB. If he comes back next year, it changes the whole layout of this team, and I think, in my opinion, but you're losing a lot of big pieces. Jamari Thomas, too. I mean, and then we'll see who transfers. I think you're going to see some guys that just haven't played much this year. Like, wouldn't shock me, honestly, if you see a guy like Austin Hero transfer or some of the other young guys on this team, or maybe just guys that are looking for new opportunities in general. So I think point being, a lot of things are going to happen this offseason, in my opinion. You're going to see a new-looking team going into next year just with the faces and stuff probably. And you're also having a lot of freshmen come in. Hayden Simeon, Eli Ellis, Grant Polk, EJ Walker. That is your recruiting class that you signed for next season. Those guys are going to be coming in, and I think some of them are probably going to be competing for time on the floor, though I also expect South Carolina to go out into the portal and go get some guys with a lot of experience, because that's how college basketball works now. And Michael Lynn also asks, does South Carolina get into the SEC tournament? Yep. So I've talked about this before, but every team in the conference will make the tournament this year. So South Carolina, whether they're a 16 seed, 15 seed, whatever, they'll be in the tournament. So nothing to worry about there. They will have a chance to compete for a at-large bid or an automatic bid in the NCAA tournament if they can win the SEC this year, which is going to be a daunting task, quite honestly. So again, South Carolina picks up their first win since December 30th against Presbyterian. I mean, it's been a long time, y'all. And covering this team day in and day out, kind of just seeing the way they lose these types of games. It's very nice to see them get a win. I think it's much deserved, to be honest. They've come close so many times, and they finally get over the hump. If this is the only time they win in conference play, it's a heck of a win and something you can really build off of going into Tuesday's game at Missouri, and then you get Arkansas and John Calipari back here next Saturday. So let's flip over to college baseball now. I was at all three games this weekend, and I was even at last night's game doing a doubleheader between baseball and men's basketball. Lots of coverage this weekend. And again, all those stories are on GamecockCentral.com. So if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to our website. It's a great time. $1 every week. It's fantastic. So definitely go ahead and check that out. But let's dive into baseball. South Carolina sweeps Milwaukee this weekend, and the format of these, we're going to kind of just go game by game here and talk about everything. But let's start with the Friday game. South Carolina opens the series with Milwaukee. You're down 2-1 going into the sixth inning, and then you get a big grand slam from Jace Woida to propel you to a 5-2 win. Was not the best day for the offense. Again, Woida was the hero in this game with that grand slam in the sixth inning. But also, the bullpen was phenomenal. I mean, Dylan Eskew got the start on the mound, had to leave early. He's got a mild strain in his hemorrhoid, which is in his back. And I'll get to Dylan in a little bit here after talking about game 3 with an update from Paul Maneri. But he had to exit his start early, and that led way to Tyler Pitzer having to come into a tough spot and pitch 4 innings of shutout ball. 8 strikeouts, 2 walks. 4 hits given up, no runs over 68 pitches. Very good. He ended up getting the win. Zach Russell pitches 2 shutout innings, and then the Bulldog, Brendan Sweeney, picks up his 3rd save of the year to close this game out. So, like I said before, not a great day for South Carolina's offense outside of Woida getting the signature moment, the first one for him as a Gamecock, and that's what you're going to need. I know I've said it before. I even wrote an article about it this week, but I know these games aren't blowouts, right? Like you're winning close games, and I think it's good, honestly, to have these types of games because I know everyone wants to see South Carolina beat a mid-major opponent that you know absolutely nothing about, and you assume South Carolina is going to just run rule them and that be that. And if it's anything shorter than that, then it's a failure. But that's not the case. Think about it this way. Maneri basically said it this week when I asked him about it. What do you actually learn about your team blowing somebody out, right? Like what do you learn about South Carolina if they win 15-0? Rather, as opposed to what do you learn when South Carolina is trailing by a run in the 6th inning and you get a go-ahead grand slam by Jace Woida and you get some really good bullpen pitching to lock down a save? You learn a lot right there, right? Like 15-0, you just hit the ball over the yard. Great. That's awesome. Beating up on a lower tier team. That's great. It's going to do a lot for you. But to have these types of games, you have to find some clutch gene. That's where it really counts. And that's what SEC play is going to be like. I feel like that's probably the thing that most people, don't talk about when we're talking about the difference between blowing a team out and winning close in these mid-major games. It is only going to help this team, having gone through so many of these tight games so far this year, when you get to SEC play and every game will seemingly be a tight-knit battle to the end. And I know conference play, we don't know how South Carolina is going to do. They're off to a great start this year at 8-0, but you just know every weekend is going to be an absolute grind, and you're going to have to really duke it out. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. But again, South Carolina picks up a 5-2 win in game 1 on Friday afternoon going into night. Game 2, Matthew Becker gets the start on the mound, and he pitched very well. Probably the best start of the weekend amongst any starting pitcher for the Gamecocks. 6 1/3 innings, pitched into the 7th inning for the first time this year. 8 strikeouts, no walks, very good command. Paul Maneri was very pleased with how he attacked the zone. He did get into a little bit of trouble, only made one real mistake, giving up a solo home run in the later innings and also gave up another run. 2 runs on his line for the day, but again, he was fantastic. Picked up the win on 86 pitches. Brandon Stone pitched the rest of the way, 2 2/3 innings. Also gave up a home run, but besides that, he was sharp, and he looks to be a guy that South Carolina is going to be counting on in really kind of like that versatile role that Becker had been so used to pitching in for South Carolina over the years. I think that's what we can kind of see with Stone here, unless, we'll talk about it in a bit. There might be an opportunity down the road here, maybe this upcoming weekend against Clemson, for somebody to get a start, and maybe Stone's that guy. We'll see. Offensively, again, not your best day. You scored 5 runs, 4 of which came in the second inning, and then you got another run in the 7th. But again, I think it really was the pitching staff that helped shape this victory. And Becker has been unbelievable this year. Definitely the best starting pitcher on staff so far. And I thought the defense that played very well again. I think on Saturday here, and Jordan Carrion got the start at second base and made some really nice plays. He also went 2 for 3 with an RBI, had 2 big hits. Ethan Petrie had a solo home run that went off the batter's eye. KJ Scobie had a pair of runs batted in. So overall, nice win for the Gamecocks, and they end up winning the series in the first 2 games. Moving into game 3, South Carolina looking to go for their second sweep of the year. And boy, was this a nice game. Earlier today at Founders Park, just a few hours ago, the Gamecocks pick up a 14-4 win over Milwaukee, winning by run rule fashion in 8 innings. And this time around, we'll start with the offense before we get into the pitching, because that was the story of the day. South Carolina immediately comes out swinging. They had been hitting so many balls hard this season, and they just haven't been finding holes. They've dealt with a little bit of less than ideal weather conditions. I mean, not to make excuses, but like the ball is going to fly off the bat a lot more when the weather is a lot nicer out, like it was today, as I'll talk about here in a sec. But they have been dealing with the weather not being exactly ideal, the wind blowing in at times, and they've also just been dealing with hitting balls right where defenders are at. They're hitting the ball hard, but it's just right to where the defense is playing. And almost immediately in this game, South Carolina is coming away, all cylinders firing away. 3 runs in the first inning. Ethan Petrie and Blake Jackson hit back-to-back RBI doubles, both absolute scorchers off the bat. Really good swings there. And from there, you scored 2 runs over the second and third inning. You got 3 more in the fourth, and then you had 4 more in the sixth, and then 2 runs to win it in the eighth. And the other standouts, I mean, almost every starter in the lineup had 1 hit at least. Kennedy Jones was the only guy to not pick up a hit today. But other than that, you also made a lot of changes to the starting lineup. I think in total, there were 7 unique changes with the order. Number 1, Blake Jackson was hitting second today, and it was back in the outfield. Ethan Petrie moved over to right field. Jones was DHing. Ryan Bakes was catching behind the plate. Nolan Naraki was back at second base. And then you had Bo Hollins at first base, making his first career start. And then the big name of the day, Will Tippett. The summer of Tippett has officially arrived. He went 4 for 5 today at shortstop. I mean, he had an unbelievable game. Like, quite literally, probably the best game I've seen him play. Like, defensively, he was great, but also at the plate, 4 hits, had an RBI double, had 2 doubles today, in fact, and also 2 singles. So hit the ball all over the field, and he was doing that out of the 9 hole. So very good day for him. Ethan Petrie had 2 RBIs, went 2 for 3. And then Nolan Naraki had an absolute tape measure home run today, 425 feet, 107 miles an hour off the bat that landed on the left field concourse, and just was an absolute bomb. Solo home run, his first homer as a Gamecock. And Ryan Bakes also went deep, and he had 3 RBIs today. So very good day for this offense. And the pitching staff, I think, did their job for the most part. Jake McCoy got the start in the mound. It only made 1 real mistake, gave up a 3-run homer in the second inning. But outside of that, he was very sharp. 4 innings, 8 strikeouts, walked 3 guys, hit 2. His command was a little bit off at times, but I thought for the most part, he was sharp. I mean, 8 more strikeouts on the day for him, 17 so far this year. Get the walks down, command the zone a little better, and you'll be fine. I think that's the big thing with him. And he was definitely probably mixing in some more pitches today as opposed to throwing mostly fastballs. I mean, that's kind of how it was for all the guys, but especially for McCoy, if he commands the zone like he can, I think he's got some of the best stuff on the team. So he's definitely a guy that South Carolina is going to be counting on a ton this year, and we'll see what happens with him moving forward. Ashton Crowther comes in afterwards, and he ended up picking up the win. 2 innings, no runs given up, 3 strikeouts, no walks. He's quietly been very solid for South Carolina so far this year. And then you were able to get 2 new guys into the fold for the first time this season. Cooper Parks pitched an inning, gave up 1 run on a solo homer in the 8th, and then you had to pull him out to bring in Aiden Palmer, who walked the leadoff man and then ended up striking out the next 3 batters. So overall, very good game for South Carolina. No errors made over the final 2 games, I should say. And here's a great note about the pitching staff so far. South Carolina's pitching through the first 8 games of the year, 99 strikeouts in 69 innings pitched while holding opponents to a 148 batting average. And that is fantastic. I mean, unbelievable. I wasn't expecting the pitching to carry so much of the load this year and the defense. And again, the bats are starting to come around, I think. And it's going to come at the right time with a huge series next weekend. But I thought South Carolina has just gotten tremendous pitching. Again, SQ didn't pitch very long. Even before he got hurt, his command just was not there. I mean, he was kind of looking like SQ of last year. A lot of walks, hit by pitches, no command of the zone. McCoy was kind of the same way today, but he actually pitched all right. And then, Matthew Becker was your best starter this weekend and only made 1 mistake. So, again, I know you're playing Milwaukee. I know it's these random games you're playing. I know it's not, some people are going to say, oh, it's not real competition. You're not playing SEC opponents. You're not playing Clemson. You play who you play, right? No one's going to complain about 8-0, right? Well, I'm sure someone will. But you get what I'm saying? Like, South Carolina is in a good spot right now, and we will see what happens moving forward as their next game, Tuesday night. I'll be back over there at Founders Park. Gardner Webb, 6:30 p.m., SEC Network Plus. All coverage and updates for you guys on Gamecock Central. So let's get into some of y'all's thoughts. If you guys have any questions for me about baseball, basketball, whatever, I will definitely do my best to answer them. But got something here from Michael Lynn that I think is very interesting that I actually kind of asked Paul Maneri about earlier today. He says, I like Mayshore hitting second and Blake hitting ninth. I like Dalton Mayshore in the 2-hole as well. And something that I've been very interested in is the fact that, it's a little thing that you notice, but I thought about it today when asking Maneri a question is that, he's changed the 2-hole in the order so often. Henry Kazmar's made the most starts of anyone hitting second on this team. But then you've also got, Blake Jackson hitting second today. That was random. And then you also have a guy like Mayshore hitting second as well. So it led me to the question of, what do you look for in your 2-hole hitter? And he said, in a perfect world, you'd like to have a guy who can handle the bat and hit and run as a 2-hole hitter. Kazmar had been struggling in that spot, and, Mayshore and Jackson have done some good things there, but they're kind of still trying to figure out who's going to be that guy for them. And ultimately, I think at some point, Kazmar is going to break through. He ended up getting the day off today, which ended up being very important for him. As Maneri was saying, he had his best batting practice session so far at South Carolina. And I think he is your shortstop. I mean, he's your shortstop of the future right now. I mean, he's played great defense this year. The bat hasn't been there, but I have a feeling he's going to be coming along here at some point. And Michael Lynn also says, Bakes is baking. I like that. That's good. Ryan Bakes had a great day behind the plate today. And that brings me into a point that Bakes caught today, started behind the plate. Max Coffer, who actually ended up getting his first action today, will catch on Tuesday. And then it leads into something here from Jeff 2001. How concerned do you have to be about Talmadge LeCroy's hitting? He's gotten off to, quite frankly, not to sugarcoat, he's gotten off to a terrible start this year at the plate. And it's not so much because he's just like not hitting the ball. That's far from the case, actually. Like, if you watch his at-bats, he's putting the ball in play. And like Maneri says, it's kind of just, he's just running into some tough luck right now. So he's gotten off to a 1-for-18 start. He's got 3 RBIs, and his only hit was the go-ahead run driven in against Winthrop on Tuesday. But I mean, there's no sugarcoating 1-for-18. That just has not been the start you want. And he is hitting the ball hard. The defense, his defense probably needs to be a little bit better, to be honest. But overall, and here's the perspective I think we can all kind of agree to here. And look, LeCroy had a good fall and a very good preseason. At the end of the day, though, let's not forget, this is a guy that hit 240 last year. It is not like he has ever really been some world-renowned hitter because, as a freshman, he hit 253. His best year actually was his sophomore year where he hit almost 300. He hit 289, and then he hit 242 last year. I mean, this is a guy that is a 254 lifetime hitter. So it is not like he hit 400 last year and then he's just had this massive drop off this year. Again, he had a nice spring leading into the season, but that is totally different from the regular season. And I think at some point it's going to click. I do like hearing Mainieri continue to have his back and have confidence in him. He's still the number one catcher. He's still going to play a bunch for this team and contribute a lot. Again, it's baseball. He's just going through a slump right now, you hope, and that he can maybe get figured out. I mean, again, the Clemson series is upcoming this weekend. If there's any perfect time to get going and get into a groove, it would be this weekend because South Carolina is going to need it for sure. EXO has a long answer. Well, not even answer, just comment here. They say, love hearing Mainieri talk why he puts guys in. Last year sounded like like throwing you-know-what at the wall to look what sticks. Mainieri gives guys a chance to prove themselves, different attitude at the core. You're totally right. I mean, we have seen so many different guys play so far for this team. I mentioned it earlier, how many changes there were to the starting lineup today. I mean, it was the most obscure, different-looking lineup this season for South Carolina. I mean, just to kind of put it into perspective how different it was, you had Nathan Hall leading off in this game. Blake Jackson hit second. Ethan Petrie hit third. Kennedy Jones hit fourth. Ryan Bakes hit fifth. Nolan Naraki hit sixth. KJ Scobie hit seventh. I'm thinking third base, but he hit seventh. Bo Hollins hit eighth, and Will Tippett hit ninth. I mean, that is so different than what we've seen from Mainieri this year, but I like it. I like seeing him make adjustments and make changes. Again, it's not a problem to have one starting group of 9 players that you just want to roll out every game. If that's your MO, cool. That's fine. It means you have a pretty good team. But also, South Carolina is a good team. They're just adjusting. And I like how many different looks they're giving guys. Like Jordan Carrion's a perfect example, a guy that, as we all know, didn't get to play at all last year for South Carolina with his whole 2-time transfer situation and whatnot. He gets the start the other day, and he gets 2 hits. And he also had a great defensive play today. Like SportsCenter needs to be in the top 10. A leaping grab at third base that robbed a line drive base hit. Probably a double if it goes over his glove. I mean, just a really standout play. And that's the thing. Guys are taking advantage of their opportunities. Carrion's a perfect example. Jace Woyda's had a really nice start to the year and had that big grand slam the other day. And Blake Jackson did his job today. He made some great plays in the outfield and also had that RBI double. So, again, Bakes did a nice job today. Naraki was back in the lineup, did his thing. Bo Hollins had an RBI single as well. So, and Will Tippett, I mean, like I said before, Will Tippett is also the perfect example. Like 4 for 5 today. That's the nice thing, is that it's not just Mainieri making changes just for the sake of making changes. It's also he's making changes that work, and guys are making him look, absolutely right. They are proving him right, and that's a good thing you always want to see. So, again, the vibes are just definitely different this year. I mean, last year was last year. But again, the way people are going to judge this season, right or wrong, I know it's like, it's like the Super Bowl around here, right? It's like the World Series came early. It's the series next weekend against Clemson. I mean, Paul has not been a part of this series before, and he was actually asked briefly about it today in a general summary of what he had to say. With the Clemson series coming up, he didn't have that kind of rivalry when he was at LSU. LSU would play midweek games against Tulane and stuff, and they would have the rivalries mixed in from SEC play. But, all anyone ever really talks about is beating Clemson when he's around town. No matter what happens next weekend, though, all their goals are still in front of them. I think that's the thing that people need to probably remember, is that if you don't win the series next weekend, I know everyone thinks that, if you don't beat Clemson, that's a failure, which, of course, it is, because you want to win that series. That does not mean the season is a failure necessarily, though, right? If you don't beat Clemson, don't lose faith here, in this team, right? Here's me on my soapbox talking about this team. They're 8-0 right now. If they get swept or drop 2 out of 3 or whatever next weekend, obviously I think they can definitely win 2 out of 3 with the way they're playing and the way Clemson's playing. But there's still a lot of season left to go. Like everything is still out in front of them. They haven't even started SEC play yet. So again, it won't define their season, is what Maneri was getting at. And at the same time, though, he doesn't ignore the fact these are still big games they're going to be playing next weekend. Like that series is I think it always has been, I think always will be, that third weekend of the year. It is the early benchmark to see where your team is at. Like if this team is winning that series next weekend, I think a lot of people start to take notice that, anyone that's doubted this team going into the season, you probably start to take a little bit more notice of like, hey, South Carolina just beat a top 15 team in a weekend series with 2 of the games coming in the upstate. That's pretty impressive if they can do that. Again, they got to go out there and actually do it. But we're talking about this team a lot differently than we are right now. Like things really heat up next week. And if you win that series, you're feeling great. You lose that series, I know there's probably gonna be people who probably check out or whatever, whatever the deal is, right? And probably lose faith very quickly. That's how it works. But I think South Carolina has got a great chance to go out here and do something really fun this season. Make a nice run and go somewhere. They haven't been in a long time, but it all starts by winning the next series here. And I like hearing Maneri constantly talk about that they're focused on the next game. Like everyone's probably already, overlooking the Gardner-Webb game on Tuesday. Like South Carolina should win that game, no problem, right? We've seen this team lose midweek games before. I think this year is just different in terms of, losing games when you shouldn't. I think we will see what happens, but I think South Carolina, they've kept everything in perspective. It hasn't been – their focus right now is not on Clemson. After the game on Tuesday, different story. But the focus right now is on Gardner-Webb and winning that game. And EXO says we better not be getting swept. I agree. Don't get swept. The rule of thumb, at least in SEC play, has always been win your home series and do not get swept on the road. Like win a game somewhere on the road. In this case, Friday nights at Clemson, Saturdays in Greenville. That's basically a home game for Clemson, though I'm sure South Carolina fans will show up. And then, and by the way, no, there is no game at Segra this year for South Carolina against Clemson, though they will be playing Charleston at Segra Park next month in March. So that's something to look forward to. But then the final game of the series is back in Columbia on Sunday as a 5:00 start at Founders Park. So you've got 2 games basically on the road here, and that's always gonna be tough. But if you win one of the first 2 games, you take it back home Sunday. Hopefully, win the series there, and you're feeling really good. Like I know it's going to change the perspective for a lot of people. Good or bad. You lose that series next weekend, a lot of people will probably have doubts about this team. But if you win the series, it's like, all right, this team might actually be for real. Now, getting into some of the important notes here before we start to wrap it up about, what is to come moving forward here. Paul Maneri did bring up some interesting notes that I'll share real quick. He did say McCoy will probably come back on 1 day's less rest for his next start, which would be next weekend against Clemson. So hypothetically, that would mean he would start Saturday against the Tigers in Greenville, and Matthew Becker would start on Friday in Clemson. So very interesting there. The reason being, as I kind of alluded to before, Dylan Eskew hurt himself recently with the strain in his hemorrhoid in his back. So they're going to give him a few extra days to kind of hopefully get him, set to make his next start. Ideally, I think that would probably be Sunday, right? That would probably be Sunday at home against Clemson. I think that's a good spot for him to be in because, I kind of, remember I was looking back at some notes and stuff. He started that game last year at Clemson and didn't pitch overly great. It was all right, but I think it's going to be easier and probably better for him, back from, injury or whatever, if he starts on Sunday to, pitch at home. And I think with the series on the line, look, Dylan had a great first start, not so good in his second start. So you hope he kind of finds that balance of commanding the zone. using his pitches to his best ability. Like, he's got 5 pitches to throw, and this is a big start for him. And I like Becker being in the Friday role. And that's I think that's going to end up being the case. Basically, if what Mainieri says is true, essentially, then Becker would probably start on Friday. He didn't say it explicitly, but you got to figure, McCoy moves up to Saturday, Becker moves up to Friday. That's good to know there. And then as for Tuesday's game, just one other note here. Mainieri did say Jackson Soucy will start on Tuesday. And then I mentioned it before, Max Coffer is going to catch on Tuesday and get the start. So all good stuff right there. And we will see what happens. Next time we will talk baseball on GC Live will be series starts on Friday at Clemson. We will probably end up doing a Wednesday edition. I've got some, we got baseball media availability on Thursday, I'm sure this week, but also got some stuff going on my personal life on Thursday. So we will probably end up doing either a midday edition on Thursday of GC Live, or we'll just do Wednesday at some point. So, but I will definitely pass that info along whenever we get there, and we'll talk about that series coming up, and we'll recap the midweek game as usual. So that's going to do it for now. Again, South Carolina sweeps the weekend series against Milwaukee this past weekend, and basketball picks up a huge win over Texas, like we talked about much earlier in the show. Softball 15-0 right now. Great weekend for them, honestly. They've just looked phenomenal so far this year. And then, women's basketball picks up a nice win too. So lots of good things going on in Gamecock athletics right now. And yeah, we'll see what happens next. Hopefully it carries over. And if you're looking to join in on the fun, if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to GamecockCentral.com. Great conversations going on the Insiders Forum, where all of our discussions go for any sport, anything going on. So much good interaction over there. We've also got a handful of stories over there. Baseball, basketball, football recruiting, obviously, always going on. Lots of good stuff there. And women's basketball, too. So lots of fun over there. And then also, if you're not already, subscribe to Gamecock Central's YouTube page. If you're watching on YouTube right now, just click off the video real quick after the stream is over in about 30 seconds. And then hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying. So like and subscribe, essentially. And then if you're listening on, in our Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching right now, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. So that's going to do it for now. We will be back here next Sunday to recap the weekend series for South Carolina baseball as they take on arch rival Clemson. So until next time, thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye.